Hello, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the intro. That was one of my recent songs that I released called Pacific Walrus. And I just started using the songs that I've recorded instead of the kind of placeholder kind of copyright free stuff that StreamYard provides. And although it doesn't really fit the tempo for who we're going to be discussing today, Mr. Kurt Cobain, he had an appreciation for acoustic music and kind of laid back stuff as well as the more harder stuff that he was known for. So let's get right into it. And I'm going to say hello to the chat. Hello, Val. Glad you could make it, even though you're meeting your mother soon. And like I said, tell her I said hi and let me know how it goes. I'd really like to know about that, and also let me know what you think about the parts of the stream you missed, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case, because this is a case that I've followed for a decade, probably more. And I don't think we've ever discussed it together. You know, we've discussed it, but I don't know your opinions on it. So it would be really great to hear what you have to say about it. And hi, Amy Boston. Glad you could make it as well. Our friend in Massachusetts, who of course did so much during the Free Karen Reid movement and has a channel of her own. Where she does true crime of various cases, and it's always good. And if you're a fan of the Boston accent and you miss it from hearing it during Karen Reid's trial, Amy Boston is the place to go. So glad you're here as well. I'm glad Nasty Meal is here, our friend from the Dabbleverse and fellow Stuttering John aficionado. And glad everyone's here. So let's get right into it. So Kurt Cobain, born February the 20th, 1967, in Aberdeen, Washington. He was musical from. I'm just going to give like a background about Kurt before we get into his death and everything, because we don't like to. We like to create a whole big picture here of people. We don't just get into like the crimes or the deaths or whatever. We don't work on just blood and guts here. We humanize people. You know what I mean? I think that that's lacking a lot in true crime. People, just see it as another fucking case, whereas I try to, respect the fact that these are people who had lives, as much as I can. So, by extension, creating a full picture of them. So, he was musically influenced from a very young age. He came from a family of musicians. His aunt was a very accomplished guitar player. His great uncle was in an Irish tenor band, and that's Cobain's family background is Scottish and Irish, as is most people around the town of Aberdeen, Washington, and Washington in general. That part of the country. I'm glad you could make it, Val. Glad you're here. So glad you could make it. Yeah, I was just saying. I think you were doing something. Just saying, this is a case that I've been studying for 10 years, and we've never actually discussed it with each other. What we both think about it. I can't believe I've never brought it up to you, and it's never came up in any of our conversations, because Christ, it's a big one for me, and I'm kind of weirded out that I didn't cover it sooner. I really don't know why, because I think it's other than the Moors murders, I think it was the first case that piqued my interest, and certainly the first one where I disagreed profoundly with the official narrative. So it will be great to hear what you think, Val, and everybody else. So yeah, Cobain, massively musical family. Like I said, aunt guitar player, great uncle in an Irish tenor band, and from early age was singing. And you're so right. We talked about the 27 Club, but never specifically this. Exactly. Yeah, I always thought that was like this was a case that, but I think maybe because Amber did it. Amber did ATS News. Our friend Amber did her whole series on it. Maybe that made us not want to do it, you know what I mean? Because sometimes, like, as creators, we want to respect other creators and go, we don't want to do a case they're doing. But Amber would be totally cool with it, and is, she, was very encouraging in my community post and when I announced this. So yeah, I just think maybe subconsciously it could be that. But you know what I mean? Like that can happen, but sadly, you know, in true crime, some people can get like that. But Amber certainly isn't like that. But yeah, you know, we never know. But yeah, the 27 Club live we did was remarkable, you know. And I was actually thinking about Amy Winehouse and her music the other day, and it made me think of you, you know. So I think the biopic they did on her was terrible. But that's for another live, Amy Winehouse. I'll certainly be doing a live about Amy. Um, yeah, and um, yeah, I'm glad you think the same. Yeah, and basically, yeah. So early influence. Grew up loving the Beatles, like many young people did, especially of his era. But obviously me, not of Kurt's era, but growing up in the northwest of England, where the literally like 10, 15 miles from where they grew up. Of course, me, I heard the Beatles from a very early age as well, and that shaped my musical direction as well. So me and Kurt certainly had a very similar early music background. Getting in the car to leave and meet my mom, but I'll be listening, and we listen when we'll listen to everything later that I miss. Oh, that's fine, Val. Yeah, drive safely, and don't pay too much attention to chat, and don't get caught using your phone whilst you drive. That would be my advice. That's the last thing you need. And I hope your meeting with your mother goes well. And like I say, tell her I said hi, and we can touch base later, and you can let me know how it goes. And I can't wait to hear your thoughts and theories about this case, because it's a mammoth one. Um, so yeah, I think he was huge. Oh yeah, he certainly was. He was into Creedence Clearwater Revival, the Kinks, like all that, those kind of 60s like American psych, but also British beat groups. Uh, Same, kind of introduction to music as me. You know what I mean? It's bizarre that we're so, separate in age. Cobain and I are separated by like 30 odd years between when he was born and me. But we have basically the same kind of musical background in what we like. But he also enjoyed like the standard 80s pop as well, which I'm also a fan of. But I think in later years he probably would have played down as much as how much he liked that. But yeah, he had a happy childhood up until his parents divorced at the age of 9, and before then he was a very outward going, happy kid. But parents divorced from that really tender age. You know what I mean? Just before puberty, it's like the worst age, I think. You can have your parents divorced if there's a good age. You know what I mean? If there's a good age, which there isn't. But yeah, he went from this happy-go-lucky, loving life kid to being very withdrawn and just miserable, and that's a sad, pretty sad standard reaction. And his mother was a waitress called Wendy, and his father was Don, who was a mechanic. And Cobain, going back, Kurt Cobain wrote his first song age 3, and his aunt would actually record him singing these songs on an old cassette, and it was played. These recordings were played in the documentary Kurt and Courtney, which was what I watched that initially piqued my interest in this case. I was in Florida, and probably actually more than 10 years, like more like 15 years. You know what I mean? I was in Florida, and I was on vacation there, and I was in my hotel room. It was storming, as it often does in Florida. I was just kind of binging for stuff to watch, and that came up. And the documentary, it really made me, because I always heard everyone say, "Oh yeah, she had him killed," and I thought it was just one of those things that people would say, because she's a cunt. You know what I mean? Let's put it bluntly. That's what Courtney Love is, in my opinion, anyway. But I think I used to think, oh, people are just saying that because she's a bitch, and it would be pretty believable. But watching the documentary and seeing the whole ordeal and what various people said that we're going to get into later on, it completely changed my mind and made me very serious about it. And from that moment on, sporadically, I've delved deep into this, and now my interest in this case has resurged because of a great channel run by two ladies called I think literally called Who Killed Kurt, and on YouTube, and they have websites as well. They do advocacy work, and basically they've tried to get the case reopened to no avail, and this has cost them both significantly. I was just in there live, and I think they're still on live now on their channel, the two women that run that channel, Who Killed Kurt, and they're an amazing resource of information that I'd never heard of, and they have interviews with people who would know, and they speak to people very close to the whole thing. So they're not just two women, or people in general. It doesn't matter what the gender is, but they're not two people in general who are just from afar speculating. They've spoken to people who were who were around at the time, who were around Kurt, who were around Courtney, who were around it all. So I think these people, and they've spoke to Tom Grant, the PI that Courtney hired, and I have my own kind of opinions on him, and they have a very, me and them, the women that run that, are in total agreement about what happened to Kurt, and who did it and why. But we'll I praise them, and I advise anyone to go and check out their channel after my live as well, and I'll put them up on my community board, because that's what I like. There's no competition. We both I don't like competition in truth. No one owns a case. You know what I mean? And I take my hat off to those ladies and say they're doing the most work out of anyone that I can see on it, and are providing the most resources for everyone like myself who want to, state their piece and have a go analyzing it and going through it all. But yeah, and those women themselves would say, no one owns it. We're all in this together. They can reach people maybe I can't reach, and vice versa. That's how I see true crime. I don't see it as a competition. I see it as a brotherhood. We're all one in this. You know what I mean? This is the when it comes to, I think, creating, especially in true crime. I'm very of the we are one. We are not individuals. I'm a true crime communist. Let's just say I'm. I'm not a communist in real life, but when it comes to true crime, I believe in equality. I believe we're all a union. We're all in it together, type of thing. Apart from the grifters, you know what I mean. But they're not. Even Kurt's grandpa Leland said it was a murder. Yeah, and even Courtney's father, Hank Harrison, says it was a murder, and so he's passed away now, Hank Harrison. But even Hank Harrison, Courtney's own dad, wrote a book about how she thinks she caused it to happen. So you've got her own fucking dad was saying she did it. Oh my god, you know what I mean? Like think of another case where the person hasn't been charged with it. They've never been convicted for it, but their own goddamn father said, "Yeah, I think they did it." You know what I mean? I honestly think they. It's instead of, oh, great, glad you could make it, Amber. I was really hoping you could make it, and I know that this time during the week isn't the best with you, what with the kids and the family and all. But so appreciative of you being able to make it, and I want to be able to make more of your lives. But with rugby, my weekends get pretty tied up, and I can't stay up as late as I'd like. I like to get to bed super early, because my body takes a battering in the morning. I really don't need a late night. But yeah, I'm gonna make the effort to try and make more of your streams, and I'm glad you could make it. I was just shouting out, obviously I was shouting out the women who killed Kurt, that channel, which I know you're familiar with those ladies as well. And I was just in there live previous to going live. And I know that you have a good relationship with them. And I was just saying how their videos and streams have inspired me to, go back down this rabbit hole, which is something I've been in 10, 15 years, since I first saw the Kurt and Courtney documentary, like many others, I would assume, just got me right down in this rabbit hole. And as I was saying earlier, it's the first case where true crime case where I disagree fundamentally with the official narrative that I ever investigated or got into. So it's like very close to my heart. But it's also your series of videos that you did as well, your documentary series about it, which also like reignited that interest in me. So I've got to give kudos to you and to the Who Killed Kurt ladies for the great jobs that you do and the inspiration for me to do this stream and to carry on reinvestigating it and looking at more facts and evidence. You're very open. Welcome. Glad you're here. And so yeah, back to Kurt. The his parents' divorce. Sorry, I go into tangents, but I always get back because I have my notes handy. Without them, it would be a total fucking free for all. The stream would be very punk rock, sans notes. You know what I mean? It would be from one thing to another. There'd be no fucking structure. You know what I mean? And then that has its appeal. And my earlier streams used to be like that, and people never complained. But I do think it is important for me to make notes, so I don't forget any key details, and I stay on a general course. So his parents' divorce caused a bit of tension between him and his parents, and the step parents and the boyfriends, girlfriends that his parents would have. He didn't like him, didn't get on with them, and then oftentimes he would leave home or get kicked out and go and stay with friends, school friends. Like one of the teachers at his school put him up, and I'm glad you could make it. And one of the teachers at his school put him up, and they were his teacher's sons were friends with him also. So they said, "Dad, can you put Kurt up?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure." And he stayed with school friends and did chores and stuff. But when he couldn't find a place to crash, he'd stay underneath his local bridge and sleep there. And he actually writes about that in what is my favorite Nirvana song, "Something in the Way." I think it's a brilliant song, and he mentions that experience being underneath the bridge during that whole time. And yeah, you can I've snuck out before about when I was a kid and stayed out all night and stuff and kind of slept rough with friends, but on your own as a kid, I can't imagine that must have been fucking terrifying, underneath a bridge like that, and in the dark. Anything can happen, it's some real balls. Right, right there. It just shows you how bad things must have been at home that sleeping under a fucking bridge was a better option to him. And I only could feel terrible for him, but despite that, he was still given nice things, despite those tensions. His parents he got his first guitar age 14. It was between that or a bike, and I think the whole musical world is grateful that he chose the guitar over the bike. But maybe if he chose the bike, he'd still be alive. But without those songs, I mean, the 90s would have been certainly the earlier part of the 90s would have been lacking in terms of good American music. The Brits were making the brilliant music in the 90s, but the Americans were lacking a bit. Certainly, if Nirvana hadn't have come along, that whole grunge movement, the guitar being cool again after dance music had been such a mainstay for a while, that never would have happened, and that would have been a tragedy, and many people would never have picked up a guitar. So it's great for the world that Kurt picked up a guitar, even though it was ultimately a curse, at the same time as a blessing, his talent. Very good covers by you about Kurt. Thanks for your video. Thank you very much for making it, and I'm glad you could make it here, and I hope you enjoy everything else we've got in store for you, and the rest of the viewers. We've got a lot to get through, and despite Kurt's difficulties, he found solace in his local punk and hardcore scene. Uh, so there was in his town in Aberdeen and in the surrounding towns and areas, there was like kids like him and youngsters like him who were also into punk rock and hardcore. And this is where he met Chris Novoselic, and they formed their first band together called Fecal Matter. Funny name, I know. And in 1985, and they demoed, and it didn't really. They demoed some songs, made some home recordings, but it never really went anywhere. They did a few like small gigs, talk about like people's yards, people's backyards, and stuff like that. Really early stuff, but as an early band, I've heard some of those demos. You know what I mean, that they were doing, and as a first try, it's not bad. It's not terrible. From the stuff they were doing in the early days, and then Fecal Matter became Nirvana in 1987, and Chad Channing was the first permanent drummer that they had. They went around with various different drummers, trying different drummers, and then Chad Channing was the one they kind of settled on and did their first album, Bleach, with, until he was ultimately replaced by Dave Grohl, obviously later of Foo Fighters fame. And 1989, the year of Bleach, was also the year that the first album was also the year that Courtney Love first saw Kurt for the first time whilst he was performing. And then they first formally and officially met later in 1990, in January the 12th, 1990, in a nightclub in Portland, where Courtney went up to Kurt and told Kurt that his girlfriend was fat. And then Kurt pinned Courtney to the ground in like a playful kind of wrestling thing, and then I think that Kurt liked Courtney's kind of confrontational, very blunt, and almost kind of like a man kind of personality. He liked that, and they became exclusive and official in October 1991, after being on again, off again, kind of friends with benefits almost, until they became official. And then by this point in October 91, late 91, Kurt's fame was massively on the rise. Nirvana was doing great numbers in utero. Obviously was later on, but Nevermind, sorry, Nevermind was doing great, and that was coming, and so all their first hits were coming along, and they were signing to the majors, and the money was coming in, and because originally, even during the Bleach album, Kurt was still earning money. Kurt was still earning money from being a janitor, and I forgot to mention this earlier. I actually had this in my notes, but for whatever reason, didn't mention it. He dropped out of high school in his senior year due to a lack of credits, and then whilst his graduating class was still there, he became the high school janitor. So during Nirvana's early years, Kurt would do that janitorial work as well as musical work, which is what most musicians have to do in the early years. Work a part-time job to supplement gigging and paying for equipment and everything, because it's only really the top people that make a lot of money in music. I'm fortunate to make money from the composition and DJing, but like I say, most of my money comes from DJing and DJing spots and stuff like that. There isn't. It's only really the top tier recording artists who make the big bucks, and the top tier, performance artists who make the big bucks. I mean, I make good money for a DJ, but not like crazy, not like the millions, but very, very well, but not to talk about me too much, because that's not what it's about. Just to kind of give you perspective, I suppose. You don't just, even if you've got an album out that's doing pretty good, you can still be not doing great, and it's usually the first album that bands make fuck all money on. You know, the Stone Roses, Skid Row, many other bands made absolute jack shit on their first album. You know, because of labels taking the publishing away from them, and also maybe them having to release it on an indie and things like that. So yeah, bands usually make fuck all from their first, but by the time Kurt and Courtney were official, that's when Kurt's fame was on the rise. And I don't think that that was, you know, by coincidence. You know, Courtney had a pattern of seeking out people, men who were on the rise, because I believe that she, you know, despite her having this whole persona of I'm this big feminist, I think that Courtney didn't believe that she as a woman could make it, and that she needed a man to help propel her, you know, which is, you know, laughable considering what she says about being this huge feminist. But like, that's the truth and what I think, and that's what others who you know used to be in relationships with her have said, that she like lacked self-esteem, so would latch on to people, you know, to try and make them huge, make them famous, so that she could bogart their fame, so to speak. And I think that that's what she was doing and did with Kurt. I think she saw he was getting big, and obviously Bleach was. She saw him when Bleach was coming out, and she could see the potential that had. And then, never mind, you know, it was a completely different fucking level, and that's when I think she really was like, right, let's gotta lock this down and get right in there, because he's you know he's gonna be huge, and he is huge. He was huge at that point. Courtney banged every swinging dick who performed in the grunge scene before 86 and 94 in Washington. That's absolutely true. It's very much like Nancy. You know, she was fucked by Steve Jones of the Sex Pistols before she got with Sid Vicious. You know what I mean? And that's what Courtney was. And she wasn't even just a groupie in the grunge scene in Washington. You know, when she spent time over in the UK, she was banging, you know, Echo and the Bunnymen, and those, you know, British kind of post-punk new wave kind of bands that she was hanging around with. She hung around in Liverpool, you know, and that's where she met Echo. And I'm not sure about any other bands that she had runs in from that scene, you know, because especially around that time, I don't think many of them would have liked her personality very much. You know, you've got to understand the people in the north of England really don't like phony people. They're very genuine in the northwest of England, and they can spot phoniness from a mile off. And you don't get very far with people in the northwest of England if you're a phony. You know, people. That's why people in England like the voices of people from the north the most, because they're considered to be honest, more honest than people down south. And that, you know, that's probably why she didn't get very far in England, because she's a fucking bullshit artist. She's a social chameleon. She changes to suit the people around her, and social chameleons don't do very well in the north of England. And that's just who she is. And sadly, Kurt was. I think Kurt always tried to see the best in everybody he was with, and you know that makes, you know, people like empaths. You know, true crime communist. Oh, you're a little behind. I'm glad you liked that comment, Val. But yes, I'm a true crime communist. It is not. My case that I am looking into. It is everybody's case. We are a brotherhood and a sisterhood in this. We are a union. I'm glad you like that. And yeah, Courtney was sucking everyone's dicks and trying to get her, you know, her claws into someone who was going to be big. And like in this documentary, Kurt and Courtney, her ex-boyfriend, who she did this to, and he said himself, you know, he was so overwhelmed with how demanding she was and how ruthless she was, that she made him hate music. She made him not want to be a musician anymore. She was that pushy with him, saying, "Oh, you have to wear this. You have to go and meet these people. You have to go and gig here. You have to do this." It just took the fucking fun out of it, and the life out of it for him. And he was like, "You know what? I fucking hated it." And he was like, he said, I'm glad she did that because otherwise I'd have ended up like Kurt. I'd have ended up dead. You know what I mean? Either blowing my brains out or having my fucking brains blown out. You know, and that's the damn truth. That's the damn truth. This is a pattern. This is a pattern. This isn't just one scorned ex-lover. That guy, when he said that, was married happily with kids, and it certainly wasn't like that. So this is a pattern, okay, of her behaviour. And she banged Alan Partridge. We got, yes, she did, and then she slagged him off, saying that she banged Steve Coogan, who played Alan Partridge, a very famous UK comedian, an actor. Obviously, the Americans know him as well from Tropic Thunder and some other American productions he's been in, like quite a few good films. But yeah, she banged him, and then she had the audacity to say that he's dangerous and that he caused Owen Wilson's suicide attempt. I'm not going to censor myself. Fuck the censors. I don't give a shit if this doesn't get out. I'll say suicide. I'll say murder. I'll say all the fucking words I like. I don't care. Yeah, she had the audacity to say that he caused fucking Owen Wilson to commit suicide by getting him on drugs. That's the most, her saying that her calling people out for getting other people on drugs is the most hilarious thing I've ever fucking heard. She got her own daughter on drugs, allegedly. She got her own staff on drugs, allegedly, so that she could control them. And manipulate them if they said anything bad about her, like going to the press. She could go, oh, well, they're on it too. You know what I mean? So that is the biggest. She has no fucking shame. The lady has zero shame at all and is oblivious, seemingly oblivious to how she's perceived. Either that or she just doesn't give a fuck. Because for her to say that is laughable. She's the fucking bitch who, got Kurt, seriously onto heroin. He'd done it back in '87, but he tried it. He wasn't like a fucking addict or a regular user when him and Courtney met. He'd done it once in '87 and wasn't, regularly doing it. He was abusing pain pills, and then in '89 or early '90, Courtney sees him taking these pain pills like oxys or like pseudoephedrine, shit like that, and she said, "Oh, that's weak shit. That's baby shit. You want to be doing the hardcore stuff." And she no, she basically, obviously he was a grown man at this point, but she influenced him to do fucking heroin, and then that never stopped. And Kurt, liked heroin so much and opioids because of chronic stomach pains, which he'd suffered from since childhood, and was something that ran in his family. Real bad stomach pains, and he was, using the heroin and first the pain pills and then the heroin to treat it, so he wasn't always in agony, and you gotta sympathize that he wasn't, doing it, just because but you know what I mean? Like, people have this perception that like addicts just do drugs because they're fucking selfish and shit. But like, there is selfishness in it. But I think that people do it to mask some kind of pain, whether that's physical or psychological. And in his case, it was probably both. He had his parents' divorce, a tough upbringing, and he had this stomach pain. But yeah. She talking about Steve Coogan getting fucking Owen Wilson hooked on drugs when she basically encouraged Kurt to do smack and encouraged, and allegedly got her own daughter on drugs. You know what I mean? It's fucking hilarious. And they got serious. Nevermind was coming out. Smells Like Teen Spirit. Nirvana, biggest band in the fucking world. On a high. Hi, Adrian. So glad you could join us. Glad you could make it. And so yeah, everything's fucking rosy and hunky dory. And they by January 1992, Love is pregnant with Frances Bean. And a month later, as Nirvana's getting real big in the world. Kurt and Courtney get married in Honolulu, Waikiki Beach in Hawaii, which is a beautiful place. I've never been to Hawaii. I've always wanted to go. I only, know about Waikiki and Honolulu Beach and all that because of watching Dog the Bounty Hunter. And he's pretty controversial figure. But my grandparents were major fans of his. And as a child, I used to watch Dog the Bounty Hunter religiously. So yeah, and he was, he lived in Hawaii, so I knew Honolulu and Waikiki because of that show. But yeah, a little kind of side note. Yeah, and it was suggested in a Vanity Fair interview that Courtney did that she took heroin whilst pregnant with Frances Bean. But despite this, Frances was born healthily on August 18th, 1992. And the next year, strains, that were already deep rooted, began to become, undeniable and clear in the marriage. And this is like a multitude as we get into 1993. This is a multitude of reasons. They were getting big and obviously more money, and Courtney went and bought a Lexus, and Kurt fucking hated that and said, "Look, you got to take it back. Everyone will call me out as a sellout." A Lexus to Kurt was the symbol of selling out. A Lexus is the car that oil tycoons drive, that CEOs drive, that bankers drive. Those are, in Kurt's minds, the enemy. The enemy. And to drive a Lexus would be to be the enemy, to don essentially the enemy's uniform, to drive the car of the enemy, to indulge in and live like the enemy. And that wasn't what Kurt wanted, you know what I mean? Kurt didn't want all the materialism. Courtney did. And that was a real sticking point that began to really show its head when the money started coming in 1993, and had already came in, but majorly by then after Nevermind, and as they were starting to record In Utero. I'm glad you could make it, Diva Girl. And yeah, I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on it all as I get through all this. But yeah, this is when the cracks initially start to show, and there's also tension over money as well, because Courtney keeps pressuring Kurt, to do more and more with Nirvana, like say, go and do Lollapalooza, and Kurt pulled out of it, didn't want to do it, and various other things, were Courtney wanted, Courtney probably would have done better marrying Gene Simmons, to be honest with you, because Gene Simmons from Kiss, although I like Kiss's music, their early music anyway, when Ace and Peter were in the band. But Gene Simmons is like the opposite of Kurt Cobain. Gene Simmons, like obviously like a major sellout, corporate sellout, loves fucking merchandise, loves money, loves making money off Kiss and off his band, and charging the fans for stupid merchandise and exploiting the Kiss empire absolutely as much as possible. Kurt Cobain, obviously the absolute opposite of that, and Courtney hated the fact that Kurt didn't want more and more money, more and more this, more and more that, like she did. You know what I mean? Courtney was never a punk. Courtney, was never like an anarchist or anti-establishment. It was all performative. Courtney, always wanted to be part of the glitz and the glamour and the it crowd in Hollywood. As we can see when she, later tried to try her hand at acting, and stopped wearing all the grunge clothes and started trying to, be all prim and popular, and saying to Barbara Walters, "Oh, I don't want to talk about that on this. I've moved on from all that now. You know what I mean?" And it's she made her true face very clear with all that. And in 1994, as In Utero and their marriage troubles were continuing, and also it's believed that Courtney was having an affair with several people, including Billy Corrigan and a few others. And it's possible that Kurt was having affairs also. Wouldn't blame him. He certainly would have had many women who would have wanted to have been with him, and would have had many opportunities, on tour and everything like that. But Kurt wasn't really a womanizer. But if you're married to Courtney Love, and the way she was, so demanding, so chastising, such a bitch, it wouldn't have shocked me that Kurt, probably had emotional affairs with women as opposed to actual sexual affairs. He probably confided in women, and I believe that one of the women he confided in was Kristen Pfaff, which was one of Courtney's bass players in Hole. And Kristen Pfaff sadly, mysteriously, died of a heroin overdose. But I have my suspicions that maybe she was given a stronger dose than she was expecting, and that maybe Courtney had something to do with that as well, because Courtney was certainly jealous of Kristen Pfaff, because Kristen Pfaff was a lot prettier than Courtney, naturally pretty, was a good musician, and her and Kurt bonded very well, and it seemed like when Courtney and Kurt were really on the rocks, that Kristen was, seemingly on Kurt's side and more sympathetic with Kurt, even though she was in Courtney's band. So yeah, that's another side to all this. But regardless of all that, they bought a new home together in Seattle in 1994, a big manor mansion with a greenhouse on top. And this is the infamous or famous home where Kurt was later found dead. I believe he was killed, but he was found dead in this home. And March of 1994. Kurt had an accidental overdose in Rome when he was with Nirvana. Courtney later claimed that this was an attempt at suicide. I completely disagree. I think that was absolutely not an attempt at suicide. I think it was an accidental overdose, like Kurt maintained it was. I think if Kurt wanted to take himself out, he would have been able to very easily. And I think he was just hankering for heroin, because I think whatever the stuff he got hold of, either he couldn't get hold of heroin, or the stuff that he got wasn't strong enough for him, so he started taking a bunch of pain pills and drinking. And shockingly, like that can sometimes lead to, that's more likely to lead to an overdose than to someone who's a regular heroin user like Kurt was. It's very unlikely that if you're a very regular, almost daily user of heroin, that you're gonna OD from it. It's very unlikely. People OD from it when they're either new to it, or they've tried to get clean and then they get back onto it, like the guy from Glee, that guy who died, who was also, I think, 27 when he died. Could have been younger, but yeah, he tried to get off heroin, relapsed, and the brain goes, oh, I can handle the same amount that I used to, and then you OD. But yeah, I don't think Kurt was trying to take his own life. It was he used barbiturates, which he wasn't used to. He was used to opioids and alcohol, and that caused the accidental overdose. And Courtney just used that in hindsight, because it was close to his death, to say, look, there's a pattern. Our marriage was on the rocks. All this stuff, and one of the things as well is Courtney said, he dropped Francis Bean when he was high, and he felt so remorseful about that. In Rome, he tried to take his own life, but I completely think that he never dropped Francis Bean. I think that's a fucking lie. I think she just said that to him. And because when you take heroin, you nod out. He believed her, and that was just her way of manipulating him, poisoning his mind. Because her motive in all this was because she knew the marriage was falling apart, and she knew all the money that Kurt got in publishing, publishing, in royalties, in album sales, in money from tours, everything, and if he walked away from her, she'd be fucked, because her fame was entirely dependent on him. Hole were never anything special. They were never really that prominent, never really that beloved. And only one of their songs I find somewhat enjoyable, Malibu. And I have reason to believe that they ripped that off from an obscure Manchester band called The High. And I think that's probably the only reason I like that song, the song Malibu by Hole. sounds like an electric mix of the song "A Minor Turn" by The High. The studio version of "A Minor Turn" by The High is acoustic, but they did an all electric mix, and Malibu certainly has similarities to that. And like we said earlier, Courtney had her time in the UK and was very keyed into the whole, UK, certainly in the north as well. She didn't fuck around in London. It was Liverpool and Manchester where she hung out. She certainly would have been able to have heard that song and rip it off. So the only whole song I rate, Malibu, is in my opinion a fucking rip off. So there you go. So back what I was saying, Courtney's fame and her influence is entirely dependent on Kurt Cobain, because she wasn't very talented as a songwriter or as a musician, and she wasn't much to look at, and she had a personality that was like shit, and so her entire thing, her entire like money, fame, access, whatever, was dependent on Kurt. And take that away from it, and she got threatened and worried, and she was trying to fill his head with, I think, negativity, manipulate him, gaslight him, and all these things. And when she realized that that didn't work, she was like, right, let's try and get him into rehab, so that I can make a concrete plan of how I'm going to actually handle this. And that's what she did. She staged an intervention, ironically, at a time when she herself was also abusing drugs. She was saying, "Oh, you've got to get cleaner. I'm not going to let you see Francis," and all this stuff, and saying, if we get divorced, I'm going to say you're an unfit parent, and then you won't get to see your daughter, and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. Like, what a total cunt. She's doing it herself. If she was clean and she was saying that for the right reasons, fair play. But she wasn't. She was only doing it to get him out the fucking way, and in a place where she knew he was, she could figure out how to do him in and get rid of him. And that's the fucking truth. So Kurt managed to escape rehab after a few days and scaled the fence. And then Courtney hired PI Tom Grant to locate Kurt. And personally, I think Courtney hired Tom Grant as an alibi to say, look, he went missing. I don't know where he went. Of course, Courtney fucking knew where he was. He was at the Seattle home. She knew exactly where he was. There was never any. That was a load of bullshit. It was a load of shit. It was an alibi. It was a ploy. It was a ruse. And Tom Grant himself began to suspect that Courtney had a role in it herself, despite the fact that she was paying him. So, despite, I have my mixed feelings about Tom Grant, because he's said things that aren't true that I believe are true. And there's been allegations that Courtney got to him and that he's a bit of a gatekeeper in the community. And, if you get too deep, he'll try and pew certain things without any evidence, and that kind of raises red flags. But on paper, it's good at least that he did share these concerns. He could have been like many other people and taken money from Courtney and just shut his mouth and gone along with it. But he didn't. He said something at least. And then on the 8th of April 1994, Kurt Cobain was found dead. And in his body and on his, in the autopsy, they found that he had a large dose of heroin inside of him, which, in my view, even for a seasoned addict, would be so much that it would render you incapacitated. And they talk about time for it to take effect. He wasn't fucking smoking it or snorting it. He was injecting it. When you inject a drug into your bloodstream, it goes in right away. That's the appeal of injecting yourself, of shooting up, because you feel it right away. There's no build-up. It's instant. You know what I mean? So the level of heroin in him cooked up. There's no fucking way he could have been able to operate a gun, a shotgun. You know what I mean? No way. Even with a seasoned user like him, and that's the major flaw in all of this. And the cops are either paid off, couldn't care too much. Oh, it's another dead junkie, suicide, who gives a shit. Prejudice against drug users, like many cops are. Not all of them. Many cops are very some cops can be very sympathetic to drug addicts and care a lot about them and try and get them help. But some cops can sadly be very prejudicial against drug users and think, oh, it's another fucking junkie. We don't care about them like they can be with sex workers. And we've discussed this in other cases where they get hindered because of the investigators or the cops' prejudice, like the Yorkshire Ripper, where the cops didn't try hard enough until it was women who weren't sex workers who were getting killed. And that's just a travesty that certain people, certain classes of people don't get the justice just because of who they are. When you expect the police to do their job, they're paid to do the job regardless of who the person is. They're supposed to do a full investigation, and anyone with half a brain would be able to tell from the toxicology alone that those levels of heroin would preclude someone from operating a shotgun and then using it on oneself. And the reason Kurt had a shotgun was because of prowlers. He was worried about, photographers, stalkers, things like that. And I think deep down, he was worried that Courtney was going to send someone to fucking kill him. I think that's the case. And I think whoever did kill him, and I think he was killed, he knew them, and that person had shot him up before they ultimately shot him with the firearm. And we'll get into who I think that is. But that's what I think, and I don't think Kurt ever. Kurt got his friend Dylan Carlson, who I am very suspicious about. I used to think quite highly of Dylan initially when I first saw the Kurt and Courtney documentary, and I didn't initially go 100% Courtney did it because of Dylan Carlson saying, look, if I thought there was someone who did it and they were alive and I thought they did it, they'd be dead. But honestly, I now in hindsight think that Dylan Carlson knew what had happened and was paid off by Courtney to not say anything. And the reason he took the money because he's a degenerate heroin addict, and such as heroin doesn't ruin everybody like that. But it can ruin a lot of people like that, where you don't have loyalty to people, where you'll sell out your own mother for a fix. And Dylan sold out his supposed best friend for many fixes, and I think Courtney paid him off to keep his mouth shut, and I think that she did that with others as well in Kurt's camp, and with the others in Foo Fighters, like none of them think that he was murdered. I think maybe Courtney has some kind of blackmail on them. I don't know what, but that's the only thing I can really reasonably think of. Because if I was in a band with him, I'd be the main guy going, this isn't right, this isn't normal, I refuse to accept this. I want everything investigated. If he did take his life, he did it, and it's terrible, but we have to cover all bases. I'm not satisfied with what happened. But neither of them are like that. Why does it take people like me, people like Amber, and the ladies? Sorry, I nearly called them chicks, and that would be silly. The ladies, sorry, I'm in a slang mood. The ladies, sorry, who killed Kurt. To raise awareness of this. Why aren't his bandmates, his supposed good friends, Chris Novoselic, Dave Grohl, Dylan Carlson, why the fuck aren't they on here doing that? Why aren't they on here, asking these questions, raising awareness? And I think, they've been bought and sold or blackmailed. It's a simple fact, you know what I mean? If it was my friend, my bandmate, I wouldn't stop until we have all answers and all stones unturned. You know what I mean? And Where's the loyalty, man? Where's the brotherhood? So now we get into it. So there was a suicide note left, but personally, I think that the note that was written by Kurt initially was a note that he was going to give. You know, he was going to read a statement to say, "Oh, look, I'm leaving Nirvana, and I'm walking away from the music industry." And I don't know if I'll still make music, but I don't want to. I need a break away from it all. And I think that that's what it was. Like, as a note to the fans as well as the band, say, look, guys, I really appreciate you all. You know, but I need time for me. And I need time away from all this. It's too intense. And then I think Courtney, who, you know, had been tracing Kurt's handwriting in some of her notebooks, which have been seen, added on at the end stuff about taking his own life. So it would have been seen as a suicide note to further try to legitimize her claims that it was that he did take his own life, which I profoundly disagree. You know, I'm convinced it was a murder, and it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, miscarriage of justice that I've ever seen. And as well as that, we have obviously we have a statement, an interview, and obviously lie detector as well of El Duce, who was a very famous punk and hardcore singer. And you know, Kurt was very like, you know, very like, you know, his image was like, yeah, like the whole punk thing is like, yeah, like I'm punk, but like you can approach me. I'm kind of nice and all that, and I'm like really PC and all that stuff. But El Duce was like the polar opposite of that. He was like really politically incorrect. Had had a real like was really politically incorrect, very controversial. Liked using controversial language and expressions and symbology, like riling people up. And I'm more in the El Duce camp. I'm more like that guy. You know, I was always more like that guy in my earlier years of music. You know, obviously later it's not really about riling people up. It's more about helping. You know, it's more about something for my recent music. In all honesty, is more about something for someone to listen to when they're smoking a joint. You know what I mean? But early on in the first bands I was into when I was 100% punk, El Duce and his music that he released. That really like kind of controversial, kind of not as not as I guess preppy or college studenty as a lot of the punks later became. But I don't think Kurt was ever like that. I'm just saying that Kurt was more progressive, accepting, and El Duce was more confrontational, and that was very much how I am and how I was in my act. You know, not someone that you would want to go and speak. But that, like I said, that's an act. You know what I mean? Me as a person, I am very approachable, and so is El Duce. But it's like music. You know, you adopt a persona, and I don't think Kurt had a persona, but Duce did, and so did I in the early years. And it's kind of a collectively in punk, I think people adopt these confrontational kind of outlandish, angry personas, especially when they're young, because it's a vehicle to get all your shit out. You know what I mean? Like El Duce, wasn't the guy he was on stage, and neither was I back in those days when I was doing punk shows like that. It's a persona, you know what I mean? El Duce, was a really nice guy, really down to earth guy, and I tried to be the same, and but our punk personas were very similar. A guy that you wouldn't want to just go and say hi to. But that's for the music. That's what the music demanded, and that's what it is, And but yeah, El Duce, I digress. He was a great, controversial, really cool punk rocker in LA. And he wouldn't hang out. He'd occasionally make trips into LA, but he liked to hang out more out in like San Bernardino, Bakersfield way, nice and rural, off the beaten track. You know what I mean? And less attention on him, and that's the type of guy he was. He was never really like a mainstream punk. He never sold out, and he really liked Kurt, and really liked what Kurt did. And he was working at a record shop, and one day Courtney Love came along, and he knew Courtney and Kurt in past, shows, and things that they've been to, mutual friends and stuff. And Courtney turned up at this record shop where Duce Eldon Hoke is his birth name, but I'll call him Duce, was working. And she asked the guy running the place, "Oh, can Duce come in and speak to me, alone for a minute?" But the record store owner heard this himself, and so it's not just Duce's word here. There's multiple people saying this. Where Courtney was like, "I want you to whack my old man," meaning Kurt. "I'll give you 50 grand to do it." And Al Duce thought, initially, "Oh, she's taking the piss. She's joking. They probably just had a fight. She's venting." And he, as a joke, said, "I was like, oh yeah, I'll think about it. Leave it with me, and come back, And not thinking that she was serious, and him himself, when he said that, not being serious, just playing along with a joke in his mind. And then she came back and she called the place and was like, "Oh, I really need to speak to Al Duce," and he's like, and she was like, "You've really got to do it now." And Al Duce didn't do it, and it's believed, obviously he didn't want to get his hands dirty for someone like Courtney, who he really didn't like or respect, really. And also, I think he respected Kurt. He liked Kurt's music, and as a fellow punk musician, and also, I think, like I said, he just didn't want to get his hands dirty, and he wasn't for hire, but the reason Courtney would go to him, because he was, I guess, part of the persona. And in the interview he comes across very nice, but people who knew him said he was a really nice guy, but like, obviously, he could get off out of hand at times. But I really think that Courtney just bought into his stage persona. You know what I mean? Like, on the stage, he was wearing an executioner's mask, like having bondage shows, and kind of like women in bondage up on his up on the stage with him doing sex acts. But that was just a persona. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't an actual executioner. He wasn't an actual hitman. But I guess Courtney bought into that. He was in Florida recording music with Gardy Lou when she showed up the second time. Right, yeah, he was in. He was doing tunes, yeah. Oh yeah, so like, she called the studio when he was doing tunes. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And so yeah, from that point, thank you for that. Yeah, and from that point, he said no, but there is another person that she went to, and in this interview, where for Courtney, he mentions Alan, a guy by the name of Alan. He was like, "Well, I didn't take the 50 grand, but a guy by the name of Alan might have," and the FBI are probably gonna get to him, soon enough. But obviously, they never did. And the guy he's talking about is Alan Wrench, and Duce made these claims, took a polygraph test, passed it, and obviously we had the guy who owned the record store who overheard Courtney say this, and also the call she made for him when they were recording in Florida. Thank you very much, and I'm glad that we have user participation that can help me when I get things wrong. That's what this is all about. We're all in this together, and I really like that I have an audience that can help me out and will. So we've got other people as well who have heard this, so that this isn't just Duce making this claim, because it had been said that Duce made all this up to make his band big. But fuck me, the guy was getting blown on stage. He was, wearing executioners masks. The videos were really outrageous. You know, yeah, I don't. Duce never wanted to be big because somebody like him was never going to be in the mainstream. He fucking knew that. He wasn't dumb. And anyone who thought that, you know, wearing a guy, you know, wearing an executioner's mask who's getting blown on stage, you know, having bondage shows going on. Yeah, you're not going to be on Dick Clark's American Bandstand with all that going on. So anyone thinking that he made that up, you know, to make his band big, it's fucking stupid. You know what I mean? He passed the polygraph. Seems like a straight shooter to me. Seems a lot more honest than Courtney Love. Fuck me. I believe. I think most people would find Duce to be more of a credible, straight talking, honest person than Courtney Love. You know, track record. You know what I mean? All the things that she's lied about, and but we'll get into that before the end. But yeah, Alan Wrench and who was a friend of Eldon Hoke, Duce, and Duce, after making this confession in Kurt and Courtney, and also doing another interview as well, separately, where he went into more detail. Him and Alan Wrench, were apparently hanging out, and Duce, was mysteriously hit by a train near a train tracks, very rurally, and had his head decapitated. Personally, I think he was either pushed in front of a train or was murdered and then placed there by Wrench. I believe that is the case. I really do. And the reason this guy's gotten away with it and Courtney's gotten away with it is anyone's fucking guess. You know what I mean? I think it's a mixture of the cops' prejudice against Kurt for being a junkie or an addict, saying, oh, it's just another junkie suicide, just another rock star taking his own life, nothing to see here. And I just don't think that they care enough. You know what I mean? And that's the saddest thing. And I also think that Courtney's greased the right palms and either paid, blackmailed, or threatened people close to Kurt who could have and would have or should have made a stink about it all, and then by extension didn't. But seriously, the amount of people and the amount of there's more to say that Courtney Love hired someone to kill Kurt Cobain than there is evidence on Lucy Letby, which is a case I will be covering. A nurse in the UK who was accused of murdering a bunch of babies, and I think she was framed. And I think that the babies died from negligence, and she was framed by the hospital. And but yeah, there's more evidence to say that, and she's doing time for this now, and obviously she's got appeals, and she may get out soon and may get a retrial, and there's lots of shit going on. So that's a case I'm going to be covering soon and going really deep on. And that's the case that I haven't seen American true crimers cover. So I want to, introduce you all to Lucy Letby and her case. And I want to be like the turtle boy I want to be like the Aidan Kearney of Lucy Letby, because I think Lucy Letby needs somebody like that, because I think she was totally fucking set up and it's messed up. But yeah, there's more evidence against Courtney than there is against Lucy Letby, and Lucy Letby's doing fucking life currently. So yeah, that just says it all. And it was, as soon as Kurt died as well, Courtney's album did amazing. Courtney did album. She never had an album as good as the one she had when Kurt fucking died, and she'd already obviously they were already she did this whole fake mourning period, which was only like 5 fucking minutes. Let's be real here. It wasn't prolonged or anything. She'd already been seeing other men and everything like that, and then she just goes on to to completely just piss all over his legacy, basically, and rewrite history and say negative things about him that didn't happen, and all this stuff, and saying that like he beat her when he did. Cops were called to their house, but like what I think is that Courtney would do things like rile Kurt up, piss her off, and then Kurt would just lose it on her, yell at her, And then she'd be like, "Oh, he's threatening me and all this shit," and it would be gaslighting, very much like Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. So I think it was very much a similar situation there. And she badmouthed him, saying he beat her and all that. And I don't think Kurt ever fucking beat anyone in his life. Never mind Courtney. I don't think he beat anyone in his life. I think Kurt was as harmless as a fly. I really fucking do. Or you wouldn't do harm to a fly. Repeat the expression. Sorry. I always fuck up. Like I always misquote sayings and make them my own. But it's kind of funny. But yeah, I think that she slagged him off, to use a British slang. She badmouthed him after his death, and yeah, it's terrible. And she was screwed around a bunch of other dudes, and obviously never got married. Never is gonna, because she doesn't want to. She doesn't want to forfeit what she got in the will, and part of his estate. You know what I mean? Not sure she still got what she got in the will, but as she doesn't want to forfeit what she gets as part of his estate, which she probably would have to give up if she got remarried. So that's interesting. And she acts like a bitch over, Nirvana's, early recording, and she had been for a while not wanting them to be released and everything like that, when the fans wanted to hear it and everything like that. So she was a real thorn in the side of just Nirvana and music fans in general. And also, Courtney would try her hand at Hollywood, like I said earlier, and she had a part in the People versus Larry Flint, and I thought that movie was okay. I don't think it was that good. I found it kind of boring. I saw it on a plane, and I didn't think it was great. I didn't think she was particularly good in it either. And she obviously had a bit role as well in the Sid and Nancy movie. And I think she used to do that. I think she used to be a punk extra, like where she'd like just be used as an extra in like TV shows, movies that needed a punk girl, and she'd do that as well as all the other, sleeping around with bands, stripping, God knows what else she did, hustle, you know what I mean? Because she's a hustler. You know what I mean? You've got to respect her for a hustler. I don't respect her as a human being, but I respect the hustle. I think she's a good hustler, and a very good manipulator, sadly. And so yeah, and she's constantly trying to divide and rewrite the narrative and shame fans or anyone who wants to ask questions about Kurt and what happened with Kurt, and play this whole grieving widow thing when she keeps Kurt's hair and things like that, and very bizarre kind of things. And she put the hair in Kelly Osbourne, Sharon and Ozzy's daughter's hand, and it really freaked her out. And that was the hair, his hair from when he was killed, or when he died. So Courtney has got a real record of being very weird, and I don't think that her keeping that stuff is a kind of for her memories. I think it's a form of a trophy. I think she's very proud of the fact that she was able to pull all this off and isn't facing any legal repercussions for it. And she can still have her some of her Hollywood friends that she's still got left. Many of them have gotten sick of her. Billy Corrigan's still one, but he's got a reputation for being a fucking arsehole as well. So they can all be in the arsehole club, and then I guess Amber Heard can join them and all. But yeah, I hope one day that it will be reopened, like many other cases, like the Watts case. But I do sadly have a lack of faith, because I think Courtney is a manipulator. There's people in the system that are protecting her for reasons. I think she's got ties to Epstein. She's got ties to all this stuff. So she's in this whole Eyes Wide Shut Illuminati fucking club, and they protect their own. And that's why I think that, she gets help, because I think that she was very involved with Epstein and with all these kind of Hollywood freak off type shit, and that affords her a level of protection. And I think that's why. But hopefully, as a society, as we start to knock down these layers of protection and we start to demand more accountability for people, and that justice is served equally, regardless of who you know and what your name is and how much money you've got. The law is the law and has to be upheld regardless and indiscriminately. Otherwise, we shouldn't have any fucking laws. Otherwise, they're pointless. They don't serve a purpose otherwise. And that's what I hope. And I hope in time, from that, those barriers, those pillars being knocked down, that network of protection goes away, and the powers that be would be willing to throw up Courtney Love like they did Jeffrey Epstein as a type of sacrificial lamb, so that others who have done worse and who are more powerful aren't held to the same scrutiny, or takes focus away from them. I hope one day Courtney Love can have her day of reckoning, and Alan Wrench and all the others, and Dylan Carlson and all the conspirators and the enablers, and Chris Novoselic and Dave Grohl, because I think that they are part of this whole thing also, can be held accountable for, at the very least, being negligent and taking money and helping cover up what was a murder, in my opinion. A brutal murder of a talented musician that had plenty more hits in him, plenty more great music in him, and great songs in it. And I firmly believe, this is a what if. And I like to watch that Alternative Histories channel, and that What If channel, because they do What If Kurt Cobain, and they go through different years, and it's just a guy speculating on what Kurt would have done if he'd have lived. You know what I mean? And it's very interesting. And I personally think, he would have left Courtney, left Nirvana, sold his, Gotti mansion, the Gotti mansion in Seattle, or Courtney would have kept it and fucked off to, some really rural cabin, done an album all by himself, very acoustically, very minimalistically, very lo-fi, and put it under a false name, and lived his life like that, in seclusion, and seen Francis when he got the opportunity to, but probably spent time with very few other people until maybe he felt able to come back into the public eye. But I never think he wanted to be famous. I think there are many musicians who love music and love making music and love performing for lots and lots of fans, but it's difficult to perform to lots and lots of fans and not at the same time be famous and have all that attention on you and that pressure on you. And I think that Kurt, he never wanted to be famous, and I don't think it's the fame that killed him. I think that it was Courtney Love that killed him. But I think the fame certainly contributed to his downfall, and contributed to him meeting his downfall, which was Courtney Love. But thank you, everyone, for sticking with us for so long for this live. And it's certainly a topic that I'm not just going to, do one and done, and I will certainly keep pursuing it and discussing it. And as for future lives, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be going through Lucy Letby, her case from the UK, a massive miscarriage of justice, and a neonatal nurse accused of murdering babies. I think a cover-up to hide the negligence and the malpractice of the hospital, the hospital itself, and how this lady was railroaded and treated so badly, and how I feel really bad for her, and how I want to raise awareness of her case for an international audience, because it's only really known in the UK and Europe. So yeah, Lucy Letby will be next, and I also really want to badly do the Kinahans and Jerry Hutch's feud, and the background to those key figures in Irish organised crime. Keep it varied. But thank you, everybody, for being here. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Take care.